Welcome to another edition of the 5-Star Zone. I'm your host, Rico Beard, on the road in Las Vegas, and where else to be but Vegas, baby, to record some of the top games that are going to be happening in the Big Ten this week. This is a little preview of week 2, and I got to be honest with you, for a lot of these teams, I know it's early in the season, but it is a little bit of a make or break week, a little bit of a separation Saturday, because with a win, certain teams can really catapult themselves into another stratosphere. With a loss, man, it could be a very long season for a couple of teams. Now, a lot of teams out here, they got blowouts. They're going to end up winning the game, so we're not going to really break down like the Ohio State type of games. But I do want to talk about one game in particular. And I'm going to start with the Cy-Hawk Trophy, which I think is going to be a very close game. Iowa State. Iowa's been dominating this series. Iowa's won like 8 of the last 9 games. And, guys, I think that this will continue. For the Big Ten, the biggest thing that's happened to Iowa is Iowa can now score. Tim Lester has walked in there as the OC of Iowa, taking over, and they're scoring. Now, I don't know if they're going to continue this, but I do think that they will. Iowa scored 40 points last week. The defense we know is going to be that defense. That defense was lights out. The defense pitched yet another shutout. But the fact that you now have a healthy K McNamara, I look for Iowa to go ahead and win again and make it 9 out of 10 over Iowa State. Yeah, that's been the only big thing for Iowa. Kurt Ferentz knew that eventually he was going to have to fire his son. He did. I really like what I see on the improvement side, the offensive side for Iowa, the big plays. I mean, it's fun football to watch. Iowa was just methodical. You knew what you were getting. You always bet the under, but they weren't fun to watch. They run the touchdown play. You like that about Iowa. The other game I want to talk about was a few more games I do want to talk about before I get to the local teams of Michigan State. And I think maybe the biggest game of the weekend, at least the most interesting one for me, is Nebraska hosting Colorado. Colorado coming in with a ton of hype. Dylan Raiola coming in with a lot of hype at quarterback. This game is going to have a lot of scoring done in this game. I expect both teams to hit maybe even the 30s. Like, it's going to go back and forth, which defense can step up and make that stop. And I do think it's going to be Nebraska. I think Nebraska and Matt Rhule is going to get a quality victory in this game. Why? Because Dylan Raiola looks to be him. Now, I know he looks weird because he's a Patrick Mahomes wannabe with the number and the look and everything. The only thing missing is the Kermit the Frog voice. But I think he's the right fit for this Nebraska team, and the game being at home, you're going to have the sea of red behind you. For Nebraska, the biggest thing you have to watch out for is Shedeur Sanders and his elusiveness, his scrambling ability, because that is the one thing that I can say is just when you think you have Shedeur Sanders down, you don't. He scrambles and he looks deep, and the next thing you know, he's hitting this boy Travis deep downfield for another touchdown. So that's the biggest thing you have to watch out for, is if you're in Nebraska, you have to contain Shedeur. You cannot let him escape the pocket. You have to keep him bottled in. You got to hope that the black shirts reemerge and the black shirts show that they can still play that defense. And because Colorado, the offensive line and the defensive line, I am still not sold on them whatsoever. The reason why Shedeur Sanders escapes the pocket so much is simply because his guys can't block for him. Still, to this year, they're still having problems keeping him protected. If that's the case, when you get your hands on him, you have to bring him down. If not, he's going to find Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter is the big play guy. Travis Hunter could be the number 1 pick in the draft for Colorado. But, yeah, I think that the game being in Nebraska is going to help them out tremendously, and I think Nebraska will beat Colorado in this game. It'll be a staple for the Big Ten. And I said it earlier in the season, Nebraska to me is that team you definitely want to watch out for, because I do think that their schedule is conducive to they play 2 really tough games, but other than that, a lot of winnable games. So for Nebraska, I think that they get this victory. Now, I do want to talk about Real quick, Northwestern and Duke, the Smart Bowl. I think a low-scoring game for Duke. They're going to come in with Texas transfer Malik Murphy at quarterback. To me, he's the most talented person on the field. It's a pick-em game. It's going to be at Northwestern at that new kind of wild stadium, temporary stadium built on the water. I think Malik Murphy will be a little bit too much, a little too athletic for the Wildcat defense. That's going to be a Friday night game. So I think Duke will probably get that game. The two local teams, Michigan and Michigan State. This is kind of a make or break for both teams, and I'll explain why. I'm going to start with the Spartans. Spartans go on the road. Spartans are going to be in Maryland. First road game for Jonathan Smith. Lackluster game, okay? There's no way to sugarcoat what you watched, what you saw. It was ugly. There was not a lot of points scored. Michigan State scored 16 points. 2 came by defense, and they were all in the first half. They were shut out in the second half. They turned the ball over 3 times in the red zone. Jonathan Smith could have kicked a field goal to go up by 2 scores. He decided not to. And they had to squeak this thing out, and they had to get some defensive stops late in the game just to see it cement a victory over Florida Atlantic. Yeah, Florida Atlantic, not Florida State, Florida Atlantic. If you're a Michigan State fan, it was almost an embarrassing victory because you expected more. You expected more out of Aiden Childs. You expected more out of that offense. You expected more out of Jonathan Smith. You know what? You just flat out expected more, and you did not get that. It didn't take away the stench of last season or the last couple of seasons where this team has struggled. You wanted to feel good about this Spartan team. You wanted to think that, hey, this is a Spartan team that could go to a bowl game. Well, here's the deal. If you're Michigan State, this is your opportunity. Now, you're going into the game down. You're not favored at all. What are you going to do? If you're MSU, you have to beat Maryland, and you're almost a double-digit underdog. I think it's 9.5 by the time that I'm recording this. Maryland's going to be walking in there, and Maryland is going to be at home. Maryland came off a fantastic victory last week. I look at this as the biggest challenge across the board. If you're Michigan State, first of all, your defense, can you bring that defense back? Can you bring the level of intensity? Now, the thing that I stated before earlier, it was the one positive that I did like from Michigan State was the fact that they were able to get pressure. And not only able to get pressure, they were able to get pressure without blitzing. You were just bringing a 4-man front and 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and a safety. I don't care who you're playing. That's a great game for a defense. If you could bring that same level of intensity and you can make things difficult for Billy Edwards Jr., the Maryland quarterback, you give yourself a puncher's chance. Now, last week he came out there, had a phenomenal game, threw for over 300-plus yards, a couple of touchdowns. He did not have any interceptions. That's the key. Like, he looked very comfortable running that Maryland offense. If you're Michigan State, can you make him uncomfortable? Can that defense become opportunistic, force some turnovers, and help out that offense? Because the offense is struggling right now. I don't know how long it's going to take for the offense to kick in for Aiden Childs, but right now, look, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche because cliches are sometimes true. Defense travels, and Michigan State's going to need that defense to travel. If they can somehow sneak a victory out of Maryland, it puts them into the category that I do think that they will end up with a bowl game. It will get them into that 6-7+ wins. Why? Because Boston College, that game in a few weeks is going to look a lot difficult. They just went down to and defeated Florida State in Tallahassee. It went from being a coin flip game to now I think Boston College is going to be a favorite, kind of like Maryland is. If you're Michigan State, if you're Jonathan Smith, can you step up and can you show that this is going to be a different team? They say the biggest steps happen between week 1 and week 2. I don't know. Because Aiden Childs looked like a quarterback who played in his first game. He looked like a guy that, especially in the second half, he kind of lost faith in his teammates, and he tried to do too much, and he tried to always make the big throw, and he tried to make the big run and the big scramble. Look, his offensive line did not help him out a lot. The running game did not help him out a lot, but he's got to maintain his composure. Now, in the post-game press conference, he came out and he owned everything. Going back and rewatching the game, yeah, I do think that he put a little bit too much pressure and not realizing that, you know what, the key, especially on the road, is moving the chains. You don't have to always hit the 30 and 40-yard pass. Yeah, it looks great for highlights, but sometimes a 5 or 6 yard pass can be the difference. So if you're Aiden Childs, you have to stay dialed in, you have to stay focused, and you have to matriculate this team down the field and score points. You can't get away with scoring 14 points, 2 touchdowns. You got to do a lot better. This offense, the receiving core, Monterey Foster, I don't know. I could excuse Aiden Childs because Aiden Childs is a freshman. Foster feels like he's in his 10th year at MSU. Foster has to make the catches. This receiving core has to help this young man out. When they get their hands on the ball, you can't start the game off in the hole with an interception. You got to be able to drive the ball down the field. If you're Michigan State, you got to also establish a run game because that's been a problem. Adams Lynch, he proved to be running back number 1. Nate Carter needs a better offensive line, and I think he's a better running back. I don't think Nate Carter is the type of guy who can just get this thing done on its own. If you're MSU, this is a key game for you. You win this game, you put yourself in bowl contention because now you have Prairie View the week after. You could start the season off 3-0 before you hit that tough stretch of games. And now I'm including Boston College in that 4-game to now 5-game stretch. Because if you lose this game, chances are this season is going to be over as quickly as it started. So that's how important this game at Maryland is. It's not going to be easy. Mike Loxley's not going to make it easy for you. Maryland's going to come out there. Maryland played they scored 50 points. They held their opponent to 7. What are you going to do if you're Michigan State? What adjustments have you made? And how are you going to be prepared? That's the big question if you're MSU. Michigan, same thing. This is a key game for you. Why? Because if you have dreams of making it to the college football playoffs, the 12-team playoffs, you have to beat Texas, especially coming after the lackluster game that you played last week. The quarterback situation, I think, is the biggest problem. It's going to be a problem for Michigan. Davis Warren got the nod as starting quarterback. Alex Orji came in and took 25% of the snaps. I think that's going to be a problem. I can see Orji on maybe 3rd and 4th down plays or maybe goal line plays, but you have to let Davis Warren get into a rhythm. You have to let him become that quarterback and lead this team. And maybe he's a game manager. That's okay because game managers can win games. But in my opinion, Sharon Moore has to leave him in the game. He's got to let him learn. He's got to let him take his lumps. He's got to let him become better with the other receivers, anybody other than Colston Loveland, because Loveland, we know what he is. He's an All-American. But the other receivers, not there. And Khalil Mullings, I think, needs to be running back 1 in order to go in there to defeat the Longhorns. The Longhorns are coming in there. They're going to be favored in this game. I can't recall the last time Michigan was an underdog at home, but they are. I mean, Quinn Ewers is coming in here with this revamped Texas team. And don't forget, Texas was also in the playoffs last year. A lot of times in games like this, I look at who has the best player. And right now, Michigan has a phenomenal defense, but on offense, it's Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers is going to be, in Heisman contention. It really is the thing. If you think about it, it's the Texas offense versus the Michigan defense. I think those two will kind of cancel each other out. So what does the Michigan offense do against the Texas defense? Can the Michigan offense move the ball down the field? You have a kicker, but you're not going to win a game against Texas kicking long field goals. I love the fact that you replace Jake Moody. I mean, you're replacing kicker. It's becoming kicker you. It's not a slam on Michigan. It's just, my God, where are you finding this guy? Where you found this guy at Arkansas State? But you're not going to beat Texas just kicking field goals. If you're Michigan, you got to keep the game under 24 points. Plain and simple. If it gets beyond that, then I think that favors Texas. A low-scoring game at the Big House at noon. You're going to have ESPN and Fox there for their both kickoff pregame shows. You got to be able to score points. But you have to keep Texas from scoring points. You got to keep Texas from the big plays. The defense has to get their hand. They got to get pressure. They got to get sacks. They have to make Quinn Ewers' life uncomfortable. And they got to get into his head early. And if you could throw him off, then you give yourself a puncher's chance of upsetting the University of Texas and winning this thing. Because I do think if Michigan wins this game against Texas, you're now looking at a team that's looking at probably 10 wins. And I think 10 wins, you're the University of Michigan in the Big Ten, you're going to the playoffs. That's how crucial this game is. If you lose this game, especially if you lose this game badly, I think it's going to really shake this team to the core, the fan base to the core, because it's going to feel like, wow, what are we this year? I think the hangover from the championship will be over. So I don't think you want to see that. I think, as I said, if you're Michigan, you want to keep this thing under 24 points. You will give yourself a chance to win this game. You have the home crowd. What you do not want to do is you don't want Quinn Ewers in Texas to come out there and hit the big plays and really take advantage of some mismatches. Because if Wink Martindale is going to constantly keep bringing in that blitz package, you're going to leave some receivers out there on an island. Will Johnson cannot cover everybody. And even in that game, I like Will Johnson, but he got exposed. Now, what happened was Fresno State's quarterback could not connect on some of those plays. But if you're going to bring the blitz, you're going to leave your corners out on the island. You cannot give up big plays to Texas, especially early, because then they're just going to run that ball. They're going to grind it, and they're going to put this game out of reach really fast, quick, fast, and in a hurry. So that's a preview for week 2 of the Big Ten. A lot of exciting games starting on Friday night. 2 games on Friday night, a bunch of games on Saturday. And, it's going to end off with Boise State and Oregon. I think Oregon's going to snap back. Oregon's going to not shoot themselves in the foot. I think Oregon's going to score a ton of points, even though Boise State has the electric running back. They're going to curtail him, and they're going to show, yeah, we are Oregon. We're going to be competing for a Big Ten title. So lots of games this week in the Big Ten. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Keep telling your friends, and I will be back for a recap of week 2 on Sunday. Until then, I'm your host, Rico Beard. Thanks for watching the 5 Star Zone.